On page 53. Her face pressed against his rough coat. She clung to him a moment before Uncle Edmund led him away. "Come back again some day, Nero," she whispered. "Come back, come back." The little steamer chugged away downstream, and a cold wind blew up the river in their faces. Uncle Edmund and Nero had a long journey ahead of them, down the Nomini River to the Chippewa, down the Chippewa to the Mississippi, down the Mississippi to St. Louis, where Uncle Edmund lived. Tom and Caddie and Warren turned away from the dock and trudged back to the farm. Somehow Uncle Edmund's visit had not been as satisfactory this year as they had expected. When they reached home, there was no welcoming bark, no Nero to greet them, but it was too busy a time now to nurse regrets. There were the last wild grapes to pick, and butternuts and hazelnuts to gather. Tom, Caddie, and Warren were the field workers of the family. They swung off across the fields and through the woods with buckets and baskets on their arms, 3 jolly comrades in search of adventure in sunshine or frosty weather. Except for a few nutting expeditions, Clara and Hetty preferred to stay at home and help Mother with the sewing or quilting or jelly-making. As the autumn advanced, the cranberries began to ripen in the marshes. Good picture. Sometimes with the canoe, sometimes on foot, the 3 children pushed into the marshes to fill their buckets. It was dangerous going, for sometimes there was quicksand or quagmire in the marshes, and one must be quick and light of foot to leap from hummock to hummock, choosing the ground which would bear weight. Loons called and laughed their mirthless laughter over the marshes, and often a wedge of wild geese flew honking high overhead in the cold blue sky. "I'm getting dents in my thumb and finger picking so many cranberries," complained Warren. "I know," said Caddie. "Every time I close my eyes I see millions of red berries swimming around." "It's a good year for cranberries and for turkeys too," said Tom. "I guess Mother will make a lot of her turkeys and market this year." "Father says not. He says folks are too poor this year on account of the war to pay much for Thanksgiving turkeys. But Mother got more last year than she ever did before." "I know, but Father says times are worse now, and she's got twice as many turkeys to sell." "Well, I hope she keeps a few for us," said Warren, licking his lips. "Turkeys and cranberries to us. Yum! She only let us have one for Thanksgiving last year." The turkeys on the Woodlawn farm were Mrs. Woodlawn's own private enterprise. From the time that they were hatched, she watched over them with the most jealous care. She had never taken wholeheartedly to farm life, but she did have a real affection for her poultry. In her clean black and white sprigged calico, she stepped daintily about the poultry runs, with wheat of bran mash for some, and tidbits of chopped boiled egg or soaked breadcrumbs for daintier appetites. "Mother has a delicate hand with the fowls," Mr. Woodlawn used to say approvingly, and certainly her turkeys were the finest in all that rough pioneer countryside. It was always a personal grief to her when a foolish young turkey swallowed a bee and died of a stung throat, and she swelled with pride almost as great as his own when a fine cock with spread tail strutted by. This year she had the largest finest flock that she had ever raised, and she would not listen to her husband's misgivings as to price. Away she had driven that very morning, all alone in the farm wagon, with all her precious turkeys loaded on behind. As the children returned that afternoon, their buckets heavy with cranberries, they saw her driving home. They ran to reach the farmyard as soon as she did. Mrs. Woodlawn drew up the horses silently. She had nothing to say, but the back of the farm wagon spoke for her. "Gobble, gobble, gobble," cried the wagon load of tired and hungry turkeys who had come home again to roost. "Why, Ma, you never sold your turks," cried Tom, open-mouthed with astonishment. "Tom Woodlawn," cried his mother, how many times have I told you not to call me Ma?" She climbed down over the wagon wheel with the dignity of a great lady, but her lips were tightly compressed to hide their trembling. "There are nothing but robbers there in town," she cried. "They wouldn't give me enough for my beautiful birds to pay for rearing them. They said there was no market for them, no market for my birds. Ah, If I had these fine plump fowls in Boston, wouldn't I make a fortune? But out in the barbarous country all folks want to eat is salt pork. Poor trash, poor trash. She was trembling with anger and excitement. Mr. Woodlawn stood in the barn door, smiling quietly. Now he came out and put his foot about his wife. "Better luck next time, Harriet," he said. That ends on page 57.